Hello, hello, Youest You listener, family, soul member. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And I'm really, really excited to get into the topics we're going to be discussing. I'm excited for you to meet my guest. So let me introduce you to Erika Bélanger. Erika is a yoga teacher, she's a stress coach, and she's a host of the On and Off Your Mat podcast. As a teacher and leader, Erika helps her clients move from surviving to thriving by managing their thoughts, their feelings, their regulating their nervous system so that they can reconnect to their body and its needs to experience more joy, more connection, and more love. Yes, please. Yes, all to all those things. Her radiant spirit and engaging sense of humor create light-hearted somatic practices focused on awareness, intentional movement, and self-care. So, Erika, I'm really excited to talk to you. I have all kinds of questions, but before I get into them, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being here today. It's really
Thank you so
wonderful.
much for having me. I'm excited.
Yay. Let's for those that don't know you and don't know your story, let's just chat for a minute. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what got you interested in this work. Maybe if you have a personal experience or something that kind of
Yeah,
highlights how you got into it, would love to hear.
for sure. So I was that person who was like always feeling none enough, but also too much at the same time. Like that very sensitive being that just needed to numb and avoid to survive. So like that was my kind of baseline. And I suffered from eating disorder pretty young. And so when I started this outpatient program, they recommended that I do yoga. And that was kind of like the entry point for me into reconnecting with myself and like feeling my body again and allowing myself to like be in myself because I was doing everything I could to take myself out because feeling was just too much. It was too intense. My emotions were too intense. The world was too intense. So I was trying to cut everything out. So, of course, that led into all sorts of other, issues and rock bottoms. I've struggled with like chronic illness and chronic pain, addictive behaviors, like anything that was helping me numb. And in turn, it was just creating more effects of stress on my body. And it took a long time for me to figure out that if I actually address my nervous system and I address my stress, everything else kind of falls into place. My health is better, my mood is better. I'm more having the bandwidth to be able to like take the world in and take the people in with me and just I'm able to feel like I'm moving through life with that sense of thriving instead of just being like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this day and be okay by the end of the day? Like, how am I going to make this happen? So this is kind of the origin story. And like that eating disorder didn't came out of nowhere, of course. Like there was childhood trauma, there was issues like from a very young age. I was told like, stop. You're too sensitive. You're too dramatic. You're too like, stop it. That's enough. So like it started as 8 years old. I was starting to have eating disordered behavior because I tried to soothe myself into a world that could not receive me in my wholeness. Right. So that was the beginning.
I really appreciate, first of all, your vulnerability. You're just sharing, kind of going right to some of these more upsetting and probably the spots of trauma and really sharing, this too muchness, this both the holding that, what I heard you say is really feeling both not enough and then feeling like too much. And
Mm-hmm.
the even being told and reflected back by, I'm guessing, your family, by the system, by teachers, that to stop,
Yeah.
too much. And I'm curious, so with the disordered eating and the finding ways to cope and to numb, when did it become apparent to you that this was not working anymore, that you were feeling, that this was not going well for you?
Well, my first rock bottom was I went to like a conference. I was in my first semester of university and I was kind of obsessed with everything health as a way to disguise my disordered eating. Not that I actually knew that I had it. I just thought this is how I manage my weight and this is how girls do it. Like I didn't really know I had an issue until that one day where I show up to this conference that was called What is it to eat normally? And I thought it was just another disguised way to help you like get healthy and skinny, which was something that was very sold easily to us, right? So I was expecting that. And when I sat in, it was actually a conference on what it is to eat normally, in the sense of like, do you have disordered eating, or are you actually having a healthy relationship with food in your body? So I panicked. I left the room. I went to like a stall in the bathroom, sat on the floor, and just had a full-fledged panic attack, crying, couldn't breathe, it took me like 20 minutes before I could get back up. And I didn't go back to the conference. I sat on the outside on the floor and I waited for them to be done. And once they were done, I walked back in. I grabbed his business card. I didn't say a word. I just took the business card. I went home and I called to get an appointment. And so that was like the first noticeable, like, okay, my body's reacting to this information in a way that is clear. I have a problem, and I hadn't really identified it until then. That was a big aha moment of like, things need to change. The other big aha moment was hitting a really, really deep low with my health and living in chronic pain and being at a point where there was no point in living. It's like, I don't want to live like this. I rather not be here than deal with this pain every single day. And my husband at the time walked in from work, and I was laying on the floor because the tile helped me with the nausea that the pain was creating. I have endometriosis stage 4, and I had a frozen pelvis, and I was given opiates to deal with it, but I refused to take them because I felt so deeply that I was somewhere on the spectrum of addiction. And I was like, if I take this medication, I will be dead in a few years. So I threw out that prescription, and I was just dealing with pain just the best I could, which was in no way basically at that moment. So my husband at the time walks in, and he like pulls me off the ground, and I'm like pretty much catatonic. He sits me on the bed and he yells at me. And like, this might sound a little like intense, but he snapped me out of it. Basically, he was like, this is enough. Like, we have to figure out something. You can't continue like that. And to see his reaction to it, where I was completely out of it, and he was like, I'm going to help you. We're going to figure it out. This ends today. That was also like oh, okay. Like, yeah, I can't keep going like that. Even though I was having like suicidal thoughts and things, it took that for me to be ready to take action and change the path that I was on. So I would say those are the two biggest points where I was like, okay, we have a really big problem. Let's do something about it.
Yikes. Goodness, Erika, my heart is with you. And I'm thinking of how many other listeners right now, myself included, not having the same story, but, being told you're too much, using food, using other things to help cope, and to be in that space where you felt like, it's scary, right? Do I even want to continue? Do I even want to live this way? And in a way, I'm hearing, I can't live this way. Something has to change. And your husband at the time helped you kind of snap to, like, come to about that this needs to change. I think what's so relatable here is, so many of us women being raised, living in a society that, and it's starting to change, but certainly over the last, I would say 30, 40, 20 years, where there's just and beyond intolerance of sensitivity of, having your own voice, of obviously the toxic diet culture has a play. I mean, there's so much in there that I'm hearing to unpack. And so curious, from that time when you were sitting up and your husband was at the time was trying to help you, how, because I know now, you've done so much healing around your body image and nervous system and body, and embodying, a sense of love and compassion. Maybe start to bring us to that. How did you start to, and I know you said yoga, but what other things helped you to heal?
So yoga was the first door to feel my body. And that was the first step. And then moving away from the solution of opiates, what we researched was how diet, meditation, visualization were helpful for pain. So that was the next step that I took, is I changed completely my diet to like the most clean anti-inflammatory I can like sustain. I cut caffeine. I became sober. I really did like this big shift of anything that could be harmful to my system. I removed it out of my life. I cut sugar, meat, processed anything, right? Like gluten, dairy. Like I made such a big shift. And that took about 3 months to start to have an impact. And one day I woke up after pretty much around the 3-month mark and I was like, okay, I actually feel better. But it took a while. You have to be patient with like holistic approaches. And so once I started to have a bit more energy, then it was becoming more active. So walking, not like any sports or activity that would make my system more stressed in a sense, right? Like cardio or like CrossFit, like obviously that was not for me. So like more walking, more hiking, connection to nature was super healing and super helpful. And then just becoming like creating routines and habits of supporting my system, supporting my own sensitivity, and getting aware of like, what do I actually need? Because it took me for years, I was numbing so much that if you'd ask me at the time, like, what do you prefer between A and B? I couldn't even answer you, like I was so disconnected from what I wanted, what I desired, what I needed. I couldn't meet those needs. And I was kind of assuming that people would for me because somehow they would know, but I didn't even know anymore. Right. So like, that was a step to really like ask myself and connect to myself to what do I truly want? And then how am I going to get there? And discovering that within yoga and breath work and meditation, I got to a point where I wanted a little bit more. And then I was like, okay, how else can I, like, what other tools can support me? And this is where like all the somatic practices and the nervous system regulation practices came in. And by creating more safety within myself, I was able to have just more bandwidth for all the things, right? More bandwidth to feel my feeling, more bandwidth to like take on projects that would make me feel more fulfilled, like more bandwidth to even reflect and plan ahead and envision all things I was unable to do because I was so stuck into like today and right now, right? Like, can I avoid this pain? Can I avoid this emotional pain and like intensity? So like slowly it's like creating that sense of ground under your feet so you're able to look ahead, and then you can actually start to plan your life the way you want it to be. That included eventually a lot of things for me, like getting a divorce, moving abroad, changing careers. Like I made really big changes in my life because now I was able to see what it is do I want. And then, okay, how do I close that gap? How am I going to get there? Right. So I now live by the beach because that was one thing. Like I knew I needed to get out of winter. So I moved away from home and I got to like, where can I go? That's the beach. There's the jungle. There's nature. I can be outside every single day with my feet in the earth. Right. Like, what do I need in relationship and how do I need to show up? Like, I needed to let go of people pleasing. I needed to let go of a lot of things to have relationships that felt actually connected and loving, right? Like, so there's so much. I could keep going, but I think you have kind of a picture. Yeah.
Well, I'm laughing, first of all, for those that are just listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, when we got on and started talking, I'm clearly in winter in this big sweater and you're in your tank top in beautiful Costa Rica. And I'm like, good for you, girl. Good for you for following your inner, your heart, your desires. And I think something you said, this is really interesting. And I really have seen this. I've seen this personally. I've seen this with the many, many clients I've coached and worked with. And I've heard this from listeners is that you said you didn't even know what you needed because there was such a long period of time of not being connected to yourself. And I, good Lord, can relate to this. And I think that asking yourself, what do I need? And then being able to actually like both to hear it, to honor it, and then to trust that and be able to live that to me, I mean, we talk about here being your You-est You, which really is your authentic your best self, your truest self, your higher self, connecting to what really, really is going on with you. But to even do that, and I'm hearing this is the journey you went through. You had to learn how to do that. And I think this is so important to talk about because
Mm-hmm.
I know so many of my listeners here are highly sensitive and empaths, and we get you. I get you. It's, and there can be that feeling of, I don't want to have that sensitivity. I don't want to necessarily feel all those feelings. Thank goodness you did not go the opiate route. My gosh, I was thinking like, what a divine intervention, even with
Yeah.
this former husband, like, thank goodness. And you tapped into inner wisdom. What I would love to talk about, because I also heard you say the importance of creating safety within yourself, which I've experienced as well, so important. And then the bandwidth, as you have that safety, your energy expands. What are some of the somatic practices that you can talk about that you use that could help somebody perhaps listening that is feeling disconnected from their body, from themselves, that feels like,
Mm.
where, like, I know yoga is a great one, but are there any other practices you use or recommend? Hey, beautiful you, it's Julie. I'm just pausing for a moment because I want to share, in case you don't have this yet, I am going to encourage you to get your hands on my tool set to design your best life. It is free. Here's the copy. And it is pretty darn amazing, if I may say so myself. It is a 25-page guidebook. There are 7 specific practices, one for each day of the week, that are going to help you really to design your best life, to work on your mindset, on your mindfulness practices, designing your day very specifically. I'll show you here. I have a gorgeous tracking system that is all about how you align your values with how you're spending your time. And there's so much more. There's also a little extra free gift in there. I won't tell you what it is, but definitely make sure you get this for you, for your friends, whomever. It is free. Just go to juliereisler.com/toolset to get your copy. And would love to hear, what is your favorite tool out of the 7? Which one did you resonate most with? There is also an audio track in there as well. I've shared one of my quick grounding meditations. So I hope you pick it up. juliereisler.com/toolset. It's free. It's for you. I've used these tools with hundreds of clients and my coaching students, and I use them with myself. So I hope they help you to be your Youest You. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, totally. It depends where you start. So that makes a little bit of a it depends answer, right? Like if you're in a state of your nervous system where you're totally collapsed, meaning you're totally numb, you're total like you feel heavy, you feel completely disconnected, your thoughts are more around like this is hopeless and I'm helpless. Like that is one place to be. If you're in another place where everything feels agitated, you're irritable, you're like it's more of an anxiety, stress, overload, overwhelm, overthinking energy, that's a different place to start, right? You can be into those both places and
Let's talk
want
about
to
both.
move.
Let's do one
Okay.
for anxiety. I'm like, shoot, I've been in both of this. Overthinking, anxiety, and then let's go to the hopelessness, because I know those listening are going to fall into, have either of those categories. If that's
And
okay.
to be honest, you can shift in and out fairly quickly, one of the other, right? So it doesn't mean that like once you're in one state, you're stuck there for a long time. Like a healthy nervous system actually brings you through different stages with fairly a fair amount of ease. It doesn't mean that you're stuck there for a very long time. So I could be in an agitated stress today. And for myself, if I'm like agitated, stressed, overworked, overwhelmed, and I keep that for a few days, I'm going to go into the everything is too much. I am done. Ciao, bye. Close the lights. Stop talking to me. Right. Like I'm going into the overload where it shifts.
Yeah. Like I'm shutting the drapes. I'm going in my cave. Oh, I've been there. Yep.
Yeah. So if you're feeling okay, before I go into the different practices, I want to say one caveat, and it's the part of acceptance. And when you were talking about like creating that safety for yourself, I think an important piece of creating safety for yourself is being a safe place for yourself and others. So learning to accept your sensitivity, your whatever you're dealing with, learning to embrace that I'm not saying like you have to make it your superpower. I'm just saying you have to move out of shame. You have to work on the shame before you can take active actions, because otherwise it's received almost as like bullying, like you're bullying yourself into change, which in my experience is not helpful. It's actually not creating long-term change, right? So before you start, or as you work those practices, the first step is to identify where you are. Like for the example, in those two, are you in the agitated state or are you in a collapse state? Are you what, so you can know what you need in the future, right? So first it's connecting to yourself, getting to know what is happening right now. Two, you have to work on accepting that, on loving that, and changing it and taking action from a place of care for yourself and not a place of, I am broken and I need to fix this now. That's not going to work. Then from there, it's the same idea. You meet yourself with acceptance. You have to meet the energy you're in with that same acceptance. Meaning, if you're agitated, you're going to need to do something. And that's counterintuitive. And that's why I wanted to explain that background a little bit. That is going to be agitating for your energy. And people think like, I'm agitated, I'm going to sit in meditation. Well, if you've tried that before, you struggled with that meditation. You can't just tell your brain, okay, that's enough. Now you're quiet. It's going to throw a tantrum at you. So you have to meet yourself in agitation. That might look like dancing, like no one's watching, on your favorite pop song, shaking, right? A movement, something that resembles the agitation. I love something like breath of fire, bellows breath, those big breaths that are energizing. But you might think like, well, I'm already like over the top energized. I need to come down. Yes, be patient. Meet yourself there first. That helps the body release that energy, right? So then the first step is that do a practice that resembles that energy for you. So shaking, dancing, those powerful breaths, go for a run. Do something like a fast-paced vinyasa class, a power yoga class, something that has a fast rhythm that resembles that energy. Those would all be like tools to start with. And then you'll feel right away that that sense of agitation and anxiety is going to kind of lower a little bit, just because you've seen it, you've met it, you've given it attention, right? Like think about it as like a little child that's throwing a tantrum. You're not going to tell him just to shush. You're going to be like, okay, tell me what's wrong, throw your tantrum, and then I'll give you a hug. You know what I mean? Like, so it's the same with your body. Tell me what's wrong. And then I'll give you your hug. So once you move that energy of agitation, then you can go into quote unquote more relaxing practices. Now, maybe you're ready for meditation. Maybe you're ready for yin or restorative yoga. Maybe you're ready for a quiet walk in nature, or to go sit and watch the sunset, something that slows you down. Whatever you like to do, that slows you down.
Love.
Then you're going to shift and like be able to become what we call more regulated, in like a more optimal state. And that might mean you need to ask someone for a hug, you know, those long, delicious hugs. It might mean that you need to lay in bed with your pet and cuddle. You might need to go and talk to all your plants. There's so many ways that we can calm ourselves that sometimes we don't think about. And that's why I'm mentioning those extras. It's not only meditation. It's not only I need to take deep breaths. Yes, of course. Of course, go do a left nostril, you know, leading breath. Of course, that's going to help you. But first, you have to do those other steps. So does that answer? Is that enough examples for the agitation sides of things?
I think this is, and I think I can now even thread it to what it would be like. We can definitely head over to the hopeless side, but you know, I will tell you, I love this. And it's interesting. I was listening. I'm like, you know, this is true. This is true. When I feel myself in that state, one of the things, and I don't know if this is something I do often, is the shaking or some tapping, extra tapping. And I love this so much, Erika, because what you're saying, and it comes back down to, this is like the core of my belief. And what you're really reiterating is it's about truly being unconditionally loving and compassionate with ourselves. And that means meeting ourselves and a little light bulb is going off. Like I've heard this, but for some reason I'm like, oh my gosh, brilliant. Like literally meeting, like thinking of that energy that's going on in you as a little child or as its own entity, meeting that with the same type of energetic response that's going to help move it out. And it reminds me, I'm sure you know this with animals, there's that great book, Why Zebras Don't Have Ulcers, because animals do this naturally. And I was just thinking, my God, gets so in our head. And it's so true. Like I have shame, or I don't want to have that, or I want to try to avoid it. That alone, or the like, let's get through this quickly. All of that is
Mhm.
going to hinder. So I love, love, love that what you're saying here. This really rings true. And then the relaxing part comes at the end after you have allowed that energy to move out. It's really brilliant. I also
Mhm.
appreciate the talking to plants. Another thing I love that. I'm like, yes, I talk to my pet, I talk to my plants. The other thing I've been doing, because of the Dr. Emoto study with water is I'll take my water. This is going to sound so crazy, but I
Talk to
open it
your
up
water.
and I'm like, all right, I love you. Please bless my cells. Like whatever, all of these things, they all
Yeah.
help. Doesn't matter. Don't judge yourself like I was just doing.
You caught yourself there.
I was
Yeah.
like, okay.
I mean, if you want to truly meet your needs, you have to be okay with what you need.
uh,
Otherwise, you're going to bypass it and you're going to be like, it's fine. I don't really need that. That's not a worthy need. Yeah, you need that. Like, be okay with that's what your energy, your body needs. So then you can really give it, because we tend to be like, well, I want to feel better. So I'm going to go straight to like that end result practice that I know is supposed to help me feel calm, but you're rejecting the part of yourself that is feeling anxious. You're telling yourself you're not okay to be anxious. You are not worthy of love when you are anxious. So instead, you meet yourself in anxiety and be like, hey, baby, let's play, let's dance, let's shake, let's sing, whatever it is.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're practicing self-love. You didn't take a bubble bath. You didn't do those practices that, like, the list that we all have of the
Yeah.
ways we can self-love. You're truly showing up in acceptance.
Mm.
And that is life-changing.
Erika, this is so good. And it's really an embodied sense of self-love. And I really
Exactly.
appreciate what you just said, because I have been there. I know others have been there where I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't
me
want
too.
to feel anxious. I don't like this. This does not feel good. Versus, all right, I see you. I'm going to engage with you and I'm going to show up with you. And to me, it goes back to what we said in the beginning. It's about stopping that abandoning yourself. It's about stopping
Yes.
that, leaving your body, yourself, because, you're judging it, versus the opposite. To me, this embodied approach is so powerful. I've personally been working on this myself. So I'm like, oh, heck yes, this works. And I love that this has become your gift, and what you've seen in your own life has helped you to overcome addiction and self-loathing.
Yeah.
That's the gift, is to really love yourself at that physiological, that embodied, that physical, spiritual, that whole level, the whole person, not just from the mental. And that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. Because you can like try to trick yourself mentally into loving yourself, but
Yeah.
until you're actually showing up fully for what you truly need, despite you've been told that it was not okay to need these things,
Yeah.
you don't actually love yourself.
That's right.
And I'm not saying that like, it's all perfect once you start these practices, but you're taking steps in that direction. And I'm not saying I don't have days where I'm like, oh, like again, like I have to deal with this again. Like,
Yeah.
of course. But I'm more and more and more gentle with myself with repetition.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the gift. That's the goal. Before we wrap, I always love to ask, is there anything that I didn't ask you yet, or that's just coming to you intuitively that you just feel like, I call them heart flares, where your heart is like, I got to say this. Is there anything that you want to add that you feel like, our community would really benefit from? I mean, you have a lot to say, so
Yeah.
whatever's coming up for
we
you.
we did skip the
Oh,
other
we got to do
side. Do
that.
you want
Yes.
Okay, do you want to do
Yes,
that
yes, yes.
quickly
My
first?
apologies. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
No,
yes,
for you and your listeners, just in
yes,
case you want it, I'll get it in quick.
yes, please.
Okay. So that side is a very heavy energy. right? It's the energy of like, I can't anymore. So meeting yourself in heaviness for me means a weighted blanket, yoga sandbags, put your pet on your body if it's a big dog. Ask your partner to lay on you its whole body weight. Those are somatic practices to meet yourself in heaviness. Feel that heaviness. And chances are tears are going to come. What's under the layer under that's emotionally related to why you're feeling so heavy, the hopelessness, the helplessness, the shame lives there too, right? That's going to come up emotionally. Let yourself cry. Let yourself feel heavy. Let yourself feel like the world is going to end. Take a minute, do that. Then, when you have met that energy and you're ready to move on, what's the opposite? Joy, love. Do you need to be energized, like awaken? What makes you feel energized and awaken? Maybe now it's time to do those anxiety meeting practices, like almost like now you're trying to bring you towards that without like crossing the line into anxiety, but into aliveness. Maybe again, shaking and dancing is going to do it for you. It depends how slow you need to start, right? Maybe a cold shower is going to like, okay, I'm alive, right? Like, so there's smaller other things you can do that then shift you into feeling rejuvenated, re-living. And this is what's going to help you move towards that place where you can connect with others, where you can connect with yourself, and you can feel love and you can feel joy. And there's going to be different options for different people. For me, music is really healing in that sense, like starting to go up like into intensity in the music, right? Like slowly. I love cold exposure. I love sun exposure. I'm going to go bask into the sun and feel that like heat on my skin. Those are things that help me. But of course, there's a ton of options, but at least that gives your listeners a little idea of like the opposite, what we can do.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that back in. It's actually not as counterintuitive when you really think about it. It's like being with a person who's grieving. You would not come in and be in a, complete overjoyous state, right? You would naturally your energy would match
Quiet down.
your friend. You'd quiet down if someone was grieving. And it's very similar. We're meeting ourselves, the energy we're in. And I love that idea with a heavy blanket, or, I could imagine just like, it's funny, my son has this huge teddy bear, like an 8 foot, like I could see putting that on you, whatever it is, right? Whatever works, but love, even at a cellular, at that very deep level, what I think it's also saying is, I'm okay with you. I accept you. I'm
exactly
here meeting you. It's profound. I love those examples. Erika, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
This is so helpful. Any last heart flare for real now that you would like to share? Any other thing that's there for you?
I think the key to all of this is creating safety within yourself. And I think that has to start with you being okay with whatever you're experiencing. If you're unable to love it yet, just being like, okay, this is what's happening. And I'm not going to reject it. I'm not going to self-reject. I'm not going to self-abandon. Learning to just be in that space. Then I will like snowball into all the other things we've done. But like if you're at the beginning of that journey and you're like I hate that part of myself, then take a breath. Take a deep breath. And just take a moment to be like, can I acknowledge that this is my experience? Start there. Acknowledge yourself.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. This is such a powerful way to really align with your highest self, your Youest You. I love what you are sharing and what you've shared today. Thank you so much. I believe in this to the core, that it is about creating this safety and this true love and acceptance, no matter what is happening. And it's a practice. It is a practice. I know you talked about that. It does not happen overnight. We need to be gracious, graceful, kind, and compassionate with ourselves.
Patient.
Yes. And patient. Heck yes. Heck yes to that one. I am so thank you so much for being here today, for just sharing so much wisdom and yourself and your heart and your vulnerability. I'm really grateful for you, Erika, and so many nuggets here, so many takeaways that are, I know, going to help anyone who's listening to this
It
conversation.
was a pleasure.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, beautiful, dear listener. Thank you for hanging with us for this conversation. And as always, hoping that at least I can think of many, many, many takeaways from here, but that you really soak in what we were talking about and this need, this importance of being kind to yourself and creating that safety from within so that you can shine, so that you can truly be and experience life as your Youest You. So thank you to you for being here on the path, and I'm so grateful, and we will see you soon.